How you doing, everybody? It's Wardy here, and we're back at it with our latest Big Mets update segment to get into. This time, another late night edition here, March 16th, 2025, and that's all because we have a plethora of topics to get into. The Mets played not one, but two games today, the first of which that they lost against the Houston Astros. That will recap and get into the key takeaways and how did Tylor Megill perform or lack thereof. The lackadaisical offense yet again. Should we at all be concerned or just push that aside because of spring training? Along with how are the Mets configuring the rotation, as we have some key news on the fronts of Tylor Megill and Paul Blackburn. From there, we're going to get into the key takeaways in the Mets spring breakout game today with their top prospects playing, including guys like Jonathan, who looked fantastic, that we're going to highlight, as well as Ryan Clifford on the offensive end, Nick Morabito, Boston Barron, the lightning rod of an arm there, bullpen-wise, and Ryan Lambert, and a whole lot more that we'll get into, and some key news on Ronny Mauricio, as it looks like he's not going to be playing games for the Mets at least anytime soon. Hopefully sooner rather than later, but not yet. Why exactly is that is what we'll get into and a whole lot more, folks. So thank you guys kindly for smashing that like and subscribe button as you first chime in, and let me know all your initial reactions in the comments down below. Like I said, a lot to get into in this one, so bear with me. But let's first get into the key takeaways from the Mets' latest loss here to the Houston Astros. Now, just a week ago or so, not even, I was there in Port St. Lucie and in West Palm, as a matter of fact, to see the Mets face the Astros, and the Mets lost that game that day, but it wasn't because of Tylor Megill on the bump. He was fantastic against pretty much a full Astros lineup, and Max Kranick backed him up and looked great too. Since then, Max Kranick and Clay Holmes looked vulnerable for the first time this spring that we saw 24 hours ago. Check it out in our latest content in case you guys haven't checked it out yet, as well as now Tylor Megill coming out today, but giving the Mets one of, on paper at least, his worst outings this spring. And when I say worse, it's yes, he gave up a number of runs today, but I think there's also a lot of key takeaways on how Megill looked, and we're not only going to break that down further in a second, but get into some key remarks from Tylor Megill himself, Carlos Mendoza, and others when talking about everything that came out of his latest outing. But as you guys can see here right now, especially from what we saw in his latest arsenal there, what we were getting in his pitch mix, it was as follows. And shout out, as always, to our guy here, TJ Stats, with the breakdown on X. And we see between the four-seam, sinker, slider, change, kick change, however you'd like to label it, because apparently he's utilizing more of a kick change type look, and the curveball, we see it there, all pretty much looking above average or close to for the most part when looking at the breakdown of his pitches. Right around 5% above league average that we saw in the four-seam fastball today. That topped out right around 96 miles per hour. The sinker was slightly above league average too. The slider we saw was right around league average, actually 6% above league average. The changeup was almost 10% above league average that we saw, and the curveball was sitting right around league average. So even though that Tylor Megill did not have the results he was hoping for today, he did hit some pitches over the plate today that we saw some quality at-bats there by the Astros lineup too. But I would say that I was encouraged to see Tylor Megill not walk everyone their mother, because we know that from Megill, when he's gone in a groove, something that has been a bugaboo for him in the past has been commanding that strike zone. So I'm actually encouraged to see Megill at least get beat with some pitches that he can look and reflect on and work on more throughout the remainder of spring heading into the regular season, because we all know he's going to be part of this Mets rotation, whether you guys like it or not, given the configuration with the injuries of both Frankie Montas and Sean Manaea. The Mets are not going back on that, obviously, so they have to look at and deal with what are their current options, and Griffin Canning, Tylor Megill, and Paul Blackburn. And all signs are that the Mets are far more bullish right now on Tylor Megill than they are on Paul Blackburn when looking at the immediate start to this rotation. And furthermore, on Tylor Megill and his outing, let's hear from himself as well as Carlos Mendoza.
As the guy that has options remaining, does it feel like maybe something has to happen for you to get that call for the first five?
No idea. Like I said, it's not up to me. Whatever happens, happens. All I can do is just go out there and pitch.
Apologies if the audio was low there. Again, they fluctuate every time I do these interviews, but Tylor saying he has no idea, up to them when it comes to obviously what is next for him on being in this Mets rotation or not. Now let's hear from Mets skipper and Carlos Mendoza.
Out a little bit today. It seemed like he was happy with a lot of his pitches, but also gave up the runs. How do you evaluate an outing like that?
Yeah, when you look up in his 5 inning, he gave up 4. I thought he pitched better than what the line score show. Stuff-wise, I thought it was really good. other than that pitch that he missed location, that fastball for the 2-run homer, trying to go away and left it over the middle of the plate. But I thought the changeup was good. I thought the slider was good. 5 innings. I thought it was fine.
Now, this has been my own personal observation of Tylor over the years, not only following him, building a great relationship with his family, which has been really cool to say the least. But, you know, if there's one thing that I've definitely noticed with him when it comes to his success or lack thereof for the Mets, it has definitely went in hand with velocity. I think that goes without saying, right? When Megill has really been averaging what appears to be 94, 95 plus, things have been looking good, but a slight tick or two lower there, and he has really been more susceptible to giving up barrels, and unfortunately walking some guys too, because it goes in hand with the lack of command, because he's not having as much zip on his fastball, which is means he's deferring to his other pitches, which can cause natural problems if he isn't feeling confident at all with his four seam there to really kickstart things. So for Tylor Megill, we have already been through this story with him on the ups and downs throughout his respective career, and now it is obviously in a lot of ways another make it or break it year for him. Not that I'm saying that he needs to be off the roster or anything like that, but knowing that the Mets have these rotation holes open is the perfect time for him to pounce, the same way that he's had equal opportunity in recent years thanks to recent Mets injuries every spring training. It feels like for the past 4 or 5 years at least, pretty much since he broke out for the Mets back in 2021 or so. And I've definitely been encouraged with Tylor Megill, but I can also see the rightful criticism at times when he's naturally having those respective issues. But it's a new year for Tylor, and when evaluating spring training, he's looked pretty solid. You know, today again was his worst outing on paper, but I'm encouraged to see him not walk the entire ballpark. I do think that he has higher upside in this arsenal between himself and a guy like Paul Blackburn on what you're getting, because especially when you look at the velocity, that's a key difference. And Paul Blackburn, even at his best, is not going to be a guy that has zip on his fastball, as more your prototypical ground ball pitcher, which is what he'll likely be for the Mets, whatever capacity it's going to be. And we do have some key news on that we're going to get into shortly. But before we do, let's see more here from Tylor Megill, and on the front of, not only Megill, but Mendoza, if there's anything else. And here it is.
How did you feel?
Got a microphone. Felt great. All the pitches were working. Obviously, results a little different. But main priority was just throwing strikes, attacking the hitters, getting the ball in play. Like I said, felt like I did that really well today. Obviously, second and third, hung a slider. Probably besides the fastball, it's the only pitch, really that stuck out to me. That should have been executed better. But besides that, it was good.
So again, Megill felt great. There weren't any hiccups for him, so that's at least a plus, and hopefully something that we see going forward for him. And he even alluded to himself, obviously the results were a little different, but he was confident and feeling good at least there on the mound, and was composed and wasn't having any mechanical or health issues there for us to have a cause for concern going forward. But now, guys, let's go from Tylor Megill to highlighting a little bit more on the key takeaways that we saw, because as I mentioned, there really wasn't a lot to give in the Mets 5-0 loss to the Astros today, but they did consist of guys like Tyler Zuber, who did go down, that we saw exiting the game after taking a comebacker that kind of hit him right on the back of the elbow, unfortunately. He tried to get some throws in. He looked fine with the throws, but I think the Mets were just being overly cautious with them naturally, because that arm's going to tense up in that area especially, so they just want to make sure probably ice it, and that he's going to be good to go for the next time that he's out there. But Tyler Zuber has had a very strong spring when called upon by the Mets. I'm looking forward to seeing more of him. Hopefully no more comebackers are going to be an issue or anything like that. But Jose Azocar was a standout on the offense, as he is currently batting .355 with almost an .850 OPS. So if you care about those key spring standouts, Jose Azocar has been one of them, as well as Hayden Senger. We talked about the great story that is him in our yesterday's video. Check it out. And Anthony DeComo's great piece that he dropped on Senger. Again, working the offseason at Whole Foods right now just to make ends meet, even as a full-time minor leaguer for the Mets for the past number of years. Well, Senger today, we saw in some of the highlights I'm sure you guys have seen already, he had himself a quality at-bat there that he ripped, if I'm not mistaken, for a double, as well as we saw Hayden Senger throw out a runner there at first base with a beautiful pickoff, getting him there in time. So Senger, who's deemed by many as one of the best defensive backstops in all the minor leagues, now has a greater opportunity to prove himself now more than ever for the Mets in 2025 as potentially their backup catching option, with Luis Torrens gain the starting reins now with Francisco Alvarez out for a number of weeks, sadly. But going from talking about guys there and Tylor Megill and Hayden Senger, let's get also into the news that has to do when it comes to a guy and Paul Blackburn, because as we talk about Tylor Megill and everything is looking good for him when it comes to the Mets rotation, that isn't necessarily true for everyone else. And in case you guys are wondering what exactly I mean by that, let me get this pulled up for you guys real quick. Just bear with me 1 second here, because Mike Puma did just drop this over the past, hour or so at the time of recording this one, maybe 2. Literally, that's about it here. Mike Puma here dropped the latest that I'm going to just have to go to my main slide here, but it has to do with Paul Blackburn and this Mets rotation, because, yeah, you guys see it. Let's break it down together as follows. Originally from Mike Puma of the New York Post. As we mentioned in our daily video today, one possibility the Mets officials are discussing is Tylor Megill in the rotation to begin the season with Paul Blackburn in the bullpen. And I quote this by saying the following: I can get down with this. Blackburn still needs more ramping up, coming back from injury with obviously the bizarre spinal fluid leak. And he's someone that I think is going to be perfectly fine as a swingman option for the Mets. And I do think that Tylor has more upside. And I'm going to stand by that. While Blackburn, I think, has a greater floor in what you're getting, I think Blackburn has worse as like a 4.5 ERA pitcher. He's been pretty consistent, all things considered, with Blackburn in his young career, but the problem with him has been velocity and obviously handing them over the plate because he throws meatballs. So you got to make sure that can't happen, especially as a sinker heavy pitcher the way that we know Paul Blackburn is. So Paul, if he transitions to the bullpen at least to begin the year, I think that's going to be better for his development. And obviously the slow but surely ramping up there back from injury. And for the Mets, it gives them a look at a Paul Blackburn who might just be able to profile well as a Trevor Williams type to be a true swingman, where maybe he is greater in a reliever role. And don't buy into the nonsense, which is the latest numbers that will be thrown your way by some Mets fans saying that, oh, Paul Blackburn has a 10 ERA as a reliever. Is that true? Yes, but is context unbelievably important? Yes, it is, because that was across a total of whopping 4 outings that he has a total of a 10 ERA. So don't buy the stock as long as you guys are paying attention or understanding of the context. So you know very well, in the case of Blackburn, that there is upside there, the same way that Megill, whether you like it or not, he's going to be beginning the year in the Mets rotation. So let's root for him and hope that obviously we can see him with that velocity uptick, which we've seen throughout the course of spring for the most part, as well as him having a full command and confidence of his pitches. Megill was very strong in the final 6 appearances they had for the Mets last year, holding opponent batters to right around like 210 or so. You can expect that to hopefully be a continuation as long as he continues to develop in the proper direction. But I understand this has been an up-down story with Tylor, so a big test for him to begin 2025. But I think it goes without saying that in 2025, he will once again be cracking this Mets rotation. Alrighty, folks, I'm actually cutting back into this after I just finished the recording of the whole video, because I realized I didn't talk about arguably the most important topic of all, which is, yes, Ronny Mauricio. So let's get into Ronny and let's get into the latest news, which is him, and let's hear it from Mets skipper and Carlos Mendoza.
Do you think we'll see Mauricio in games this week?
No. We continue to take him slow. He's continues to progress well, so I'm not anticipating Mauricio getting action here in the next week or so with us.
What changed from?
Nothing.
I mean, I think at the beginning you said you were shooting for maybe mid-March.
Yeah, probably misspoke there. But yeah, no, he's not setbacks, nothing there. I mean, he continues to progress well. We just want to keep it. We want to keep it that way.
So obviously a bummer of news for Mets fans that wanted to see Ronny before spring training ended, including myself. Ronny is a guy that we're all very excited and eager to see back, not only playing for the Mets in the minor leagues, but hopefully eventually back with this Mets team. Now, the reason as to why that Carlos Mendoza broke down for you all, why he's not back out there yet, is because they're slow rolling things with him. And that's a smart thing to do with a guy like Ronny Mauricio, who didn't play baseball activities for a while, that we saw after his injury. Did have a flare-up that we saw back in, October or November, but thankfully things have been smooth sailing since then. And the Mets want to make sure it continues in that direction and to get him back healthy and eventually in games, or whether that is going to be right away in AAA Syracuse or there in AA. I'd imagine he's going to be starting AAA. The bat is just too quality, even with all the raw tools he has and a lot of work to do. I'm very bullish on the guy in Ronny Mauricio and what he can provide for this Mets team. But yeah, still a bummer, still obviously unfortunate versus what were the early reports that Ronny Mauricio would get into games around early to mid-March at absolute latest. Now we're not going to see him at all for spring training. Very Mets-esque in the sense that you're getting your hopes up on wanting to see a guy, and he's not coming back anytime soon from injury. But hopefully, and God willing, fingers crossed, on the case of Mauricio, he continues to tread upward in his health development, and we're going to see him back out there in games sooner rather than late. Now, everybody, let's get into the latest here that we saw from the key spring standouts today, because there were certainly some in particular that I want to highlight in the Mets spring breakout game, and that has everything to do with two people in particular. And we're actually going to start on the pitching side of things, because that's the topic of right now, getting from Paul Blackburn, Tylor Megill. Now, let's get into Mr. Jonathan. What a great outing that he had today for the Mets across 2 innings for one of the Mets' top pitching prospects. 29 pitches, 1 hit, 2 walks, 0 earned runs, and 3 strikeouts. Now, Jonathan, the reason why the photo looks as wacky as it does is because that's my guy's mechanics. He is so funky with his full arsenal, and you really see him get back there with that whole thing. And now to see him have that lightning fastball that, again, was topping out at 97 a day, a devastating breaking ball that's one of the better ones in all the minor leagues right now. Jonathan has a makeup that very well could have himself cracking this Mets roster before the 2025 regular season is done over the course of the 162. Not only does Tong have a very lively fastball that usually sits right around mid-90s, again touching 97 and 99 on the gun when he's really lethal, he really impressed today against a Nats prospect team that simply cannot handle the heat whatsoever. Again, the Mets were clearly the better team left, right, and center, winning this one comfortably in a way that they lost comfortably against the Astros in their spring game. Because we saw in the Astros spring game today, the Mets lost 5-0. And then in this game, they comfortably won 5-1 was the final score there. And Jonathan was a key standout that we saw on the pitching end. And Tong wasn't the only one that stood out in this one, as pitching-wise, we saw our guy Pintaro give 2 scoreless innings, including just 3 hits allowed and a strikeout. Santucci is one of my favorites currently in the Mets organization. Southpaw that they drafted the past year or so. He gave the Mets 1 scoreless inning, and a right-hander that a lot of Mets fans are ecstatic on there, and Mr. Ryan Lambert, as yes, he did give up an earned run, but Lambert is a fascinating story as the guy can touch 102 on the gun. And shout out to my guys and Mark and James at the Mets Stuff Podcast, good buddies of mine. They did an interview over this past year with Ryan Lambert, and he explained how he even ate 30 raw eggs in one single sitting in a day just to kind of show the commitment that he has to really bulking up and working on that velocity. The guy is an adrenaline-type pitcher, and he feeds off of that, and he's ecstatic at the opportunity to be cracking this Mets bullpen, whether it's this or next year. An absolute flamethrower that's expected to skyrocket through the minor leagues. And the reason why we're emphasizing him when talking about Jonathan is because Jonathan is the guy who skyrocketed in the minor leagues this past year himself. Mind you, he posted a 3.03 ERA with 160 strikeouts and over 110 innings across not only single A, Double A, and Triple A all combined that we saw across the 162 last year. And that is exactly why Jonathan is not only starting the year for the Mets that we're going to see in Triple A Syracuse, but he's a guy that very well could crack this Mets team at some point throughout the course of the year, whether that's because of inevitable injuries that happen or because Jonathan just simply dominates so much at Triple A, something that really hasn't been done by Mets pitchers in recent years. Let's be blunt about that, right? When you think of the Blade Tidwells, the Dominic Hamels, even last year there, the Mike Vassals, up until he was now part of within the Rule 5 draft, Brandon Sproat, as he was just getting his feet wet, obviously, and Jonathan's, etc. No one really thrived in that full position in Syracuse yet. And I think Jonah's going to have a great opportunity not only to do that, but maximize said opportunity that will hopefully lead to a call-up at some point this year. And I would say that if Jonathan is not called up, fingers crossed that's not because of performance, but rather that the Mets just have more than enough depth right now with the rotation, because the guys coming back from injury, like Manaea, eventually Montas, maybe guys staying out there that we haven't talked about as well, that really are going to be notable throughout the early goings of the year. No less Jonathan, excited to see more of him and what was a fantastic spring breakout start for the young Mets right-hander. But now going from pitching to offense, let's talk about one of my current favorite players in the farm, and it has been the case since the Mets acquired him, and that trade with Drew Gilbert for Justin Verlander, and that is our guy in Ryan Clifford, Mr. Tanks himself. Clifford, look at that bad boy. That was 450 feet, basically dead center, almost over the batter's eye in today's broadcast that we saw. Just around 110 exit velo, 106 to 110, as a matter of fact. But Clifford, look at that sweet swing. We're going to get into some key remarks that he shared today via interview, because Clifford, talking about being impressive, that was him to an absolute T. 1 for 4 with a home run, a pair of RBIs, and 2 strikeouts. That is the Ryan Clifford MO. And you want to know, guys, who I think of a lot when I watch Ryan Clifford? It's hard not to see shades of Kyle Schwarber, especially as a guy that's going to give you that corner outfield first base DH fit, which is exactly what the power-hitting lefty bat is in Ryan Clifford, deemed by many as the hardest-hitting Mets minor leaguer outside of Jesus Baez, currently in the organization. A lot to love about Ryan Clifford, who hit 19 tanks last year, splitting time across multiple leagues that we saw, including there with the Brooklyn A Cyclones. And we know that when it comes to the Double A Cyclones, that Clifford said in an interview today that he expects to begin the year there, but it will not be long before he cracks the Syracuse Mets roster if he does not begin there for the 2025 season. A lot of fans are excited, including myself, on the raw power and tools that come with Ryan Clifford, and he has all the makings of truly having MLB quality power that he could give you 20, 30, maybe an absolute peak of 40 home run season from the power that is Ryan. But what's going to be most important is balancing not only the power, but when it comes to the contact ability, the gap-to-gap ability. And there is a key quote here that I want to share with you all from Mr. Ryan Clifford himself in an interview today that I found very important.
Tool, but for me, I want to try to do my best to make sure it's not my own. I just try to be a complete player, and just put together some competitive at-bats and look to be a tough out, someone that pitchers don't want to face.
Love to hear that from Ryan, everybody. And I'd love to know, how do you guys feel about Ryan Clifford in the comments down below? And what are your expectations for him throughout the course of the 162? Do you think he has any shot of cracking this Mets roster, maybe even as a late October call-up that we see for playoffs? Whatever your thoughts are on the Ryan Clifford front, drop them down below. And thank you guys so much for doing exactly that. Now let's see more from Ryan Clifford himself, because I know that you guys like to see them in the player interviews too. The one time I didn't show player interviews, I had people in the comments saying, why can't I see him? So I'm going to make sure I try to show them as much as I can for you guys. But right, let's get away from with the highlights and let's get more on the Ryan Clifford front.
Time in big league camp.
I think just to get to see kind of how the guys carry themselves. It was cool to watch their day-to-day work and just the environment there, man. They're excited. They're ready for the season to start. They're ready to get after it, as all of us are, especially coming off of a season like last year. It's going to be fun to watch them and see how they work together.
Did you pick the brains of any big leaguers?
I think Winker was probably the best one, for me, as far as just get to see him hit and kind of have some similar approaches at the plate. He's a great guy overall. Some good arms they threw out there, so always feels good to put a good swing on one like that and help the team win.
Love me some Ryan Clifford. I'm really excited about him, not only for him in the minor leagues, but potentially how much of a peak he'll have at the major league level, hopefully starting over the next year or two. That'd be nothing short of fantastic to see. But guys, we not only had some key takeaways from guys like Ryan Clifford in the Big Mets spring breakout 5-1 victory over the Washington Nationals farm today, but not only guys like him, but we have to talk about guys like Boston Barron, Nick Morabito, and Carson Bench. And let's start with my guy, Nick Morabito. Nick Morabito, a former top pick by the Mets a couple years ago, I believe in the second or third round, if I'm not mistaken. Morabito had a tremendous year last year that we saw, including with the that we saw in Brooklyn, doing a fantastic job. And I actually apologize too if I said that Clifford's going to be starting the year there in Brooklyn. I did mean to say the Rumble Ponies, so my apologies again if I said, for whatever reason, it was Brooklyn. I was getting them confused right away. Brooklyn is still high A, and the Rumble Ponies are double A. Syracuse Mets is triple A. Port St. Lucie Mets is the first single A there. So, all right. But getting on the topic here of Nick Morabito, who looked fantastic that we saw last year with the Brooklyn Mets, especially as a true plate setter, was deemed as one of the best batters in all the minor leagues from the Mets this past year. Pretty sure he actually won Mets Minor Leaguer Offensive Player of the Year, too. Batting pretty much close to 300, a true plate setter at the top of the order. A great glove there in the outfield as well. A speedy man on the bags, too. Nick Morabito had some quality at-bats for the Mets in their spring breakout game today. And it wasn't just guys like him. It was also guys like Boston Barrow that I alluded to. And Barrow, who batted almost 280 last year that we saw in the minor leagues. This is going to be a big step in the right direction. A lot of people in the organization are high on Barrow and how he's expected to develop this year in the minor leagues. And for a great reason. He went 2 for 3 today that we saw with 2 runs scored and a double, if I'm not mistaken. Or at least I saw Carson Bench get a double Megill, as well as in Kevin Barada, because Barrow, silly me, he ripped himself a homer. And what was so impressive about his homer is that he did it lefty-lefty too. So lots of love there from these Mets minor leaguers and what they're giving us. Kevin Parada is batting a cool 667 with what was it, a 1600 OPS or so there, but I actually realized that just comes from today's game. It's not accounting for any other spring games, so never mind. Carson Benj, though, 1 for 2 that we saw with the walk and the double. Nick Morabito was 2 for 3 with those 2 RBIs I just talked about. Morabito's so awesome. I absolutely love the kid. I think he's going to be fantastic for the Mets. You know, when you look at guys and they're like they're a baseball player, I think that way when I think of guys like Tyrone Taylor, you know, has all the makings of just a true hard-nosed baseball player. Luis Gourmet, same exact thing, baseball player. Nick Morabito is a grinder. He's a true baseball player. He's hard-nosed. He's going to be hustling down the line every single time, trying to steal bags, lightning rod defense there in center field, as well as just some great contact ability. Again, you're not going to get home run heroics with him constantly, but what you are going to get in Morabito is a true plate setter that's hopefully going to be stealing a lot of bags and getting on base for you plenty for a lot of the big boppers in the Mets lineup in the coming years, like Juan Soto, Francisco Lindor, Pete Alonso, and or someone else, Mark Vientos, a healthy Francisco Alvarez, among others. But I want to make sure I don't miss anyone on the key takeaways, and I don't believe I did, everybody. Jet the Met Williams obviously had himself a good day too, went 0 for 2, but did have a run scored, a walk, and a stolen bag, and it looked absolutely sick in the highlights that you see beside me. So everybody, that is about going to do it for our latest Mets video, and I would love to hear from you guys, obviously, all your key takeaways when we talked about breaking down all the spring breakout stuff, as well as what is happening in Mets land with guys like Ronny Mauricio and others. Do you agree with their decisions? Do you disagree with their decisions? Please let us know in the comments down below, as always. And again, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you all in the next form of content, whether that's a stream or a video, or the next day or so. Until then, have a fantastic rest of your night, day, evening, whenever you're watching this. This is your guy, Wardy, signing out. Peace.